Hello and welcome to an episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. And this is one that's been long in the making. During the pandemic, and I think it was probably the early phases of it all, I caught up with Usman Khan from Apex E3. And at that sort of stage, he was sat, as you may recall, Usman, in your garage. I think we had to interrupt recording because there was an ice cream van and your daughters got very excited about the noise in that. And it was the early phases of of FinTech Focus TV. We've had a few episodes since then, but I always hark back to that episode. There's loads of stuff that I'm constantly reminded of, and it's been great seeing your business carry on and thrive over the period. I've seen a press release that came across my desk recently from someone who was talking about some recent news from Apex, which we're going to go into and unpack in a bit. You guys at that sort of stage, even at the very start of it, were making AI cool before it was cool, and doing lots of interesting things with the business. We spoke about your background and where the company had come from, everything you'd done beforehand. I've known you a long time in previous guises with everything you did at Alchemy before. And it's been thrilling, genuinely, to see what you've been doing and see the passion and everything that's come out of the business. So loads and loads to catch up on. It's been a while since you've last been back on the show, but very, very much welcome back.
Thank you, Toby. Really appreciate having us on. Congratulations to you as well. For the great progress that Harrington Star has made. And I actually watch your episodes with great interest, and I can see a lot of people actually value the work you do here. So it's actually an honor to be on your show.
You're too kind. Well, it's great to have you back. Usman, not everyone like you has watched every single episode, so I'm thinking there's going to be a couple who might have missed the first time out. So I'm not going to take it as read that everyone, whilst they should have done, has heard of you and the business so far. Let's kick off by just covering that. Tell us a little bit about Usman Khan. Tell us a little bit about Apex E3.
Sure. No, so I'll try and keep it brief. So as you know, I've been in the capital market space for nearly 20 years now.
Goes like that, doesn't it? We were saying at the start, wasn't it? How fast has that gone?
Time's completely flown by. I still remember when I was a grad at UBS, on the graduate training program with some really exciting times ahead. But then, cut a long story short, in 2020 we set up Apex E3. That was after Alchemy, which was also a great experience. If you recall, with Stu Taylor, Michael Schmidt, Robert Howes, three great business, great friends. And to this day we all stay in touch. And all of them are doing really well. Like everybody's doing some really good stuff at the moment in their own domains. And then we had this idea to build like a big data analytics architecture as a service. Like if I was gonna build an ability to ingest information, organize it, store it, generate new insights from it at scale, like using all this experience from Alchemy and just working in the sector, like how do I build the best version of that based on the experiences? And so we started Apex with that in mind, so that we could build out this architecture and then offer it to organizations in the capital markets and maybe beyond, in the future. So essentially, we started out, as you know, in the cryptocurrency digital asset market. We partnered with Consensus, who remains an excellent partner to this day. And Consensus, really gave us a lot of access to information, also blockchain infrastructure, just to start interacting with data sets around market data as well as transactional data. So we were able to use all that data for free, which was quite a big thing, because if we were trying to build this architecture using data from equities land or even fixed income land at that time, it was very expensive. So we built this technology in a asset class agnostic manner, but we used digital asset data as the source to build it. So ingesting real-time order books, trades, prices. We thought, let's do real-time first, because that's hard, right? Yeah. And offer that capability. So essentially, that was the genesis.
Start hard. That's always a good way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah. And actually, the way Apex was born, the name especially, and also just the idea, was actually myself and Tim Tim Grant, who's our chairman, practically co-founder and business partner, him and I, we go to the Alps, right? So we've done quite a few trips. He has a chalet in the Alps, and occasionally we go there, and just to really think about business and life and the universe. And actually, it was
nothing to do with après ski, I'm sure.
Yeah. And while we were on that trip, actually, that's when Apex was born. That's where the whole idea was born. And Apex E3, what hasn't really been mentioned a lot is the 3 E's actually stand for to help educate, empower, and elevate. So how do we provide information to people to help them, educate, empower, and elevate so they can hit their Apex? And also Apex comes from, there's obviously Formula One. You have to hit, drivers who hit the apex, they come out the corner faster, right? Are very much Formula One fans. So there's some resonance there as well. So that's the genesis of Apex, and we started building this infrastructure. In 2020, we spent some time building it, trying to get it right. We launched it to the retail world, right, just to battle test it, and then we focused on selling it to institutions. So we're very, very lucky to have some of the world's largest asset managers now using the product and using the platform.
I'll just jump in slightly. That I always think I love it when people talk about being very lucky and those sort of things. But what you've talked about, I generally don't believe in luck at that sort of stage when you onboard those sort of businesses. When you're talking about having a product that's necessary, when you're talking about having technology that does what it does in that sort of space, to in a competitive space with difficult ability to onboard, it's always because you're solving a problem, and that's that's you and the team's credit, right?
Oh no, absolutely. It has to be made very, very clear what problem you're solving, and only at that point will they accept what you have. But it's also about network. So through history, establish some really good relationships at some of these firms. That's where I would say I'm very lucky to have some really, really good relationships, actually, and I'm very thankful for those. And through those, as well as through the technology and the solutions we're providing, we were able to commercialize with some of these very influential firms. And actually, it's been amazing working with them because you get a lot of feedback. You can iterate the product. You can pick and choose what you think is good for the firm versus what you think is specific. But the firms that we're working with so far, I would say that the feedback they give is very generic in nature. That helps us shape our product so that it'll work for others as well. And we can take it to others as well. So it's been so far so good. It's been a great journey. And then where DSX comes in again, we're very fortunate to have a great partner in DSX. So DSX is run by Tim Grant and Stuart Connolly, who we've known for some time. These are great partners, influencers, mentors, I'd say, business mentors as well. And they have a really good portfolio of companies. And so, Tim is our chairman, so he knows our company intimately. And from his vantage point, he was like, the infrastructure that we've built could potentially be of benefit to some of their existing portfolio companies. But also he wants to back an initiative that, he thinks can scale eventually and solve some problems, pre-trade problems in the capital market space. And we'll probably come on to this topic, but there's a whole big AI dimension that we've been focused on as well. Like you said, we were working on it before it was cool. We were awards for it.
You made it cool, right?
Oh, OpenAI made it cool. We learned from OpenAI how to. But Tim was very interested in investing in like an AI vertical, and so we kind of AI data analytics vertical. So we aligned on that.
And this was the press release I was talking about beforehand, where DSX Capital, had this partnership with you. Talk to us about how that came about. I mean, obviously, Tim has been a chairman with you. You're at a stage of the business there where you've been running for the last 4 or 5 years or so. What was it that said, right, this is the right partnership at the right time? What's it mean for both parties?
Sure. It's very strategic in nature. So, the whole AI craze kind of like blew up over the last, I would say, 1.5 to 2 years. And, DSX is very aware of the companies out there that are professing to build AI solutions. But really what the interest is really about, how are we using AI to solve problems, right? Like, are there companies using AI to solve real world problems? And we've been really specific about the kinds of use cases we're tackling with AI. And I've been, obviously Tim being our chairman, I've been sharing the kinds of things we've been doing, and strategically how we're positioned to like really start to scale, offering those solutions out to different institutions. And obviously Tim's portfolio companies are like from institutional FX world, commodities world. So he's invested in quite a few different companies linked to capital markets. So in his mind, it made sense that we as Apex, start collaborating with some of his portfolio companies. So on that basis, it made sense to strategically partner. And we were also looking for like a backer. That we already have some really good backing with Consensus. So on the digital asset side, we're covered, right? We actually have backing from some of these asset management firms, some of the large ones, who we're very close partners with. And we wanted to get backing from an entity such as the ASX Capital, that has like its tentacles in many different domains, such that through one phone call, right, we now have the opportunity to pitch and hopefully get our solution in front of other companies. And so they really tick the box on that. And as I said, Tim and Stuart, like I view them as business mentors as well. So I learn a lot from them, and they're very good guides, in terms of navigating all these complex commercial worlds that we're finding ourselves getting into.
I think it's so important, isn't it? I love what you mentioned there about the strategy, not only behind DSX, but the all the businesses there that you're partnering with. So often there's a point of failure in the relationship between the backers and the founding team themselves, and they're looking at it and they're saying, right, okay, we need to get to this stage of Series A capital, or we need to raise this seed funding, so we just need to get someone on board with us, or we need to do X or Y or Z, and there's never that sort of proper alignment. But what I think is fascinating about that is just how mutually beneficial it is, and when you've got mutual benefit and it suits the bigger picture, that's where I think the sort of best relationships are made, and it can really thrive further forward. So everyone's on the same page about where they're driving to and where they want to go. So very excited to hear that, and it sounds like another good partnership, another masterstroke from you and the team. Let's talk a little bit about AI, because it's not an episode of FinTech Focus in 2024 without it being mentioned, or 2023 come to mention it. But it wasn't a common parlance in the same sort of way as it is now in 2020 when we last spoke. And I know that we followed it up a year or so later, and you were looking at some of the products and where it could go, and playing around with various bits and pieces. I know there was ideas about how it could be used in my business and recruitment, etc., and various other bits and pieces. But I think it's fascinating. We've seen nothing scale as fast as AI as a concept over the course of the last couple of years. I think the general sort of blocker in capital markets has been lots of excitement, lots of talk about it, but the use cases of where it can actually be used are the ones where we go back. But let's go on your AI journey. The I think it's by your own admission something there that you were thinking about and saying, well, we've got this, but how do we sell it? What does it do? And how can we push it out there? What's that journey look like for you?
Sure. No, thank you. Great question. So back in 2020, we were experimenting with like machine learning algorithms for like trying to predict like support and resistance levels on different stocks as well as cryptocurrencies and what have you. And that was like an element of AI where essentially we were trying to like make these predictions and use those in helping users understand potentially where a price is going to bottom or where it's going to top, right? So that was just an interesting use case. When OpenAI first launched their beta, no one really knew about it. It wasn't very cool, but we somehow it got to our radar, and we were like, okay, this is really interesting. They have large language models. They're offering a large language model, and at that time it was really, really basic. So we joined their beta, and we started just experimenting with it. And it was okay. So we were very interested in, the main use case was we were interested in classifying data, right? So we were getting data from Twitter, we were getting news items. We were interested in just classifying those, whether they were positive news items, negative, neutral. So essentially doing sentiment analysis. And the NLP tools at the time were good. They were okay, but they weren't great. But this large language model that suddenly came out from OpenAI, like all of a sudden it was much better at interpreting text than some of the standard NLP models that existed at the time. So that was quite exciting. But then even in our very first pitch deck, we had this thing called Alice. which stands for Automated Linking Identification Classification Engine, right? And that was part of our very first pitch deck back in 2020.
I love it where these things come through from as well. I don't think AI has got anything better where you can get those sort of name things and products from it.
That's right.
And Alice works well, doesn't it?
Yeah, we kind of have a history of like coming up with names and stuff.
Yeah.
Algorithms for market intelligence, Apex E3. The E3 stands for to help educate, empower, elevate, helping people reach their apex. And yeah, Alice has a meaning.
Love it.
But yeah, the problem was, how do you market this technology, right? How do you tell someone about it? And
especially in capital markets as well, right?
Yeah, highly regulated.
It's not known to be taking innovation lightly. I've go on in many episodes about how the cloud was only really adopted in financial services because it had to because of the pandemic, wasn't it, at certain stages? So it's not an easy place to sell AI. I would have thought with who you're pointing at.
Yeah, and definitely at the beginning it was like, oh, this is great, but I'm not sure if we're ever going to use this capability. And like you said, the cloud thing is really interesting because again, Algomi was an innovator in cloud.
Exactly. Yeah.
Firms that went to the capital market and said, "Hey, you should use cloud." And actually, Rob Howes at the time, my old business partner, he was like a great innovator in trying to like bring cloud to the masses. And so when OpenAI ChatGPT came out, the app, right, where all of a sudden you can type something in and it gives you a response back, human-like. That's what captured everyone's imagination. Like that is a masterstroke. It's a genius killer application. Hundreds of millions of users using it every day. From things like, hey, phrase my paragraph better, right? To tell me, to tell me what a Higgs boson is, right? And for students using it for their exams and all kinds of stuff, right? So when that happened, my wife feels like the least technical person on the planet. Was like, hey, I know about AI now because she recipes, for her cooking. And so when we saw that, we were like, okay, so this is how you talk about AI, and these are the kind of things that this form of AI can do. And what is it? It's basically a model that predicts the next set of words based upon some training that's happened. That's all it is, right? Although it's massive, but it's just predicting words, right?
Yeah.
And when we saw that did capture our imagination as well. And then we were like, actually, this is something we need to really now bring to the fore. And at that point, because this was out, our clients were very interested in it as well.
Yeah.
And so very quickly
no one wanted to be left behind, did they?
Exactly. But specifically,
everyone had caution, but no one wanted to be left behind, and that makes a really interesting paradox, doesn't it?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And then all of a sudden, the business, commercial people on the business side are like, okay, what can we do with this? How can it improve productivity? Right? How can it solve some of the problems we're seeing? So people start thinking at a very high level, and influential people in the firm start thinking that way. So then the question, what can we do with it? Right? And that's where really the opportunity has been amazing for us, because we were able to, just because of the history of having integrations with these models, albeit at a lab level, we were able to just really accelerate in including the latest models as part of our architecture, and then offering people like choice in terms of using different models. But I would say the key issue that capital markets today has with AI is, there's three elements. There's privacy, right? Accuracy and security, right? So these are the three dimensions that are very, very important, right, to institutions of capital markets. So privacy, well, as you know, if you want to get the most out of these models, you've got to provide them data. So if you have a research report and you want to extract information from that research report, it might take you an hour to do that. Using these models, you can do it in seconds. But you have to send that report to the model, right? And the question is, where is that model sitting? Is it in some third-party server, or is it on your server? Most of the time, a lot of the big models are sitting on a third-party server. So, sensitive documents or sensitive data is something that capital markets organizations really care about, right? And they don't necessarily want to send it out. So privacy is a big concern, and we'll come on to how you solve for that in a second. And then accuracy, right? So you may have heard of terms like they hallucinate, right? They make things up, right?
Yeah.
Actually, that term it's more a way of explaining an outcome. It's actually people using the model wrong, right? So
Yeah.
these models are
Yeah.
highly technical. Yeah, these models are highly technical. There's a way to interact with them. There's a way to use them. They have specific formats that you have to really be aware of, and they're very nuanced. And so when you don't use them right, basically these are, as we call them, non-deterministic models. They're probabilistic. Every time you ask it something, it will give you a different answer, unless you know how to constrain it. And so unless you know what you're doing, it starts to give wrong information, and then you're like, oh, the model is wrong, but actually it's not. It's the human who's interacting with the model and doesn't actually know how to interact with it, you see. So getting that nuanced understanding is critical, especially for capital markets firms, where information has to be accurate, especially if you're going to start making decisions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I was
around
speaking to someone who I'm sure you would have come across in the old Alchemy days, who was, very, very recently said, look, he's very, interested and excited about AI, but he says the issue around utilization in capital markets is approximately right isn't good enough within capital markets, and approximately right is a word or two words which I've sort of long thought about with this AI piece, and it does seem to me the sort of handbrake to its full adoption at the moment. I don't know if you'd agree with that, and how you overcome it.
Yeah, that's definitely the concern.
Yeah.
But there are ways to start to mitigate that concern. And so the final thing was security. So security is also a really important consideration with respect to this. And what do we mean by that? Where does the model run? Can this model be hacked such that it starts to leak information that you don't want it to leak? Might the model that we're using, have a virus within it, right? That might end up, messing up all of our other systems. We just saw what happened with CrowdStrike recently, which was a big thing, right? So these are really important concerns, but there are absolutely ways to manage these concerns, right? So when it comes to privacy, there are ways to actually store these models, run these models on premise, right, behind your firewall. So, like you have OpenAI, you have Google, you also have a bunch of open source models, right, that you can actually run, behind your firewall. So you're in full control of that model, right? And so you can send that model information. That information isn't going anywhere other than behind your firewall, right? So that's one thing. Accuracy is the big one, right? Like, how do you get accuracy right? And actually, there is a way. So the first thing is understanding what these models can do and what they can't do. Right? That's really important, and that's quite a technical challenge, right? It's an intellectual challenge, understanding specifically what these models can do and can't do. Once that's understood, you'll find that actually you can start to get some really accurate results. For example, a lot of these models can't calculate. So, for example, if you ask ChatGPT 1 + 1, right, the underlying model might give you back 2, but it's actually remembering 2. It's not calculating 2, just to be very clear, right?
Okay.
You see, so sometimes some engineers might think, oh, wait a minute, it can do 1 + 1. So maybe if I give it a complex equation, it might give me an answer. What it will do is it will attempt to predict the answer based upon the data it's been trained with. It's not actually calculating, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you start building your systems thinking these things can calculate, but you keep getting the wrong answer, in your application, and the users get angry, right? And so that's, again, an acknowledgement. So what you have to do, and the way you get around that, is you say, okay, if somebody says, hey, calculate this for me, what the model does is it interprets the command implicit within that sentence, right? The command is, hey, calculate this for me. But then that command is rooted to an actual calculator. You see, does the calculation, gives you back the calculation, and then the model can help you narrate the calculation very nicely, right? So again, all of that saves you a lot of code. But do you see there's a big nuance there? The model itself something else doing the calculation. So that's just I can give loads of examples, but I just want to focus on one example. So knowing how to use these models is critical, and we've spent a lot of time now going through a lot of these models and really understand the nuances. So that's accuracy, and you just spend time figuring that out, and it's hard work. It's like it's the 10,000 hour rule. Like, you really put the effort in to get that right. And then security finally is, well, once you've installed the model privately, then simply put, you are in full control of it. you decide who uses it, who doesn't use it, you decide what it's trained with, etc. So, I would say for now in the capital markets world, these are the three areas that really matter. And, we're definitely focused on providing solutions around these three areas.
And how are you finding the appetite in the capital market space? Because obviously, look, there's partnership now. There's excitement and momentum that you're in. This is like the perfect storm. We're going past the early adoption phase to everyone trying to be in a foot race to have the best AI capability. I actually saw a company today talking about wanting to be the best use cases of automation and AI technology in the world, in our sector, in my sector, recruitment. And I really like that. I really like the thinking behind that. I really like the forward thinking about saying, right, how can we make it as easy as possible for people to be productive? And that to me is where the big benefit is of this sort of space. So tell me what the appetite's like, because as we say, there's a lot of hype around it, and I think people are really desperate to see these use cases and where it's coming into play. I know you're going to be at the forefront of all of this. So tell me what that looks like.
Sure. No, great question. So in the capital market space, documents, reading research reports, reading filings, SEC filings, and a whole bunch of other, global market research reports, right? There's a lot of information, and, everybody has access to the same information, right? Essentially, the question is who's able to process that information the best, surface the insights quickly, and then act on those insights, right? To invest, exit positions, etc., right? So where these technologies can really assist, right? In from our vantage point, increasing the whole alpha generation side of things, and also workflow optimization. So a couple of examples, right? You take SEC filings, boring, big 300, 400 page documents, they come out annually. They also come out quarterly, right? They have revenue statements, profit, EBITDA, etc., footnotes, right? GAAP, non-GAAP, all this kind of stuff. And going through those takes time, right? You might have a load of those documents just sitting there, where an analyst has just gone through, maybe summarized, created a keynote, etc. One of the things these models can do really well, if they're built properly, is literally scan through thousands of those, extract the insights in an automated fashion, and present that insight back to the user very quickly. You see, right? What has that done? That saved a whole bunch of time, right? Where you typically get people to do that task. And also the kind of insight that gets surfaced is quite sophisticated, right? So what has that done? It's increased your ability to find alpha, right? In that context. So that's just one example. Another example is where you want to automate the calculation of very, very specific models, right, that you may have, and knowing when to use those models is something that can be complex. So there's this thing called AI agents that is now coming about, and a lot of people are talking about it. The funny thing is, people have been exposed to AI agents for decades through Hollywood.
Right? Yeah. Best place for it, right?
Right, exactly. So, for example, like, I don't know if you remember, this is now showing my age, but it's like HAL from Space Odyssey 2001. Right? Controlled an entire ship, right? The Terminator was actually an AI agent when you think about it, right? TARS in Interstellar, right? Very smart AI agent, right? So AI agents, what are they? It's basically where you have a computer.
Knight Rider.
Knight Rider Kit. One of my maybe that's off. He got that one right. Ultimately, right? Actually, Kit was one of my favorites. Trolling cars. But the point is, we're seeing the emergence of those type of agents today. Right? We're actually seeing them come about. And in the capital markets world, when you want to apply that concept to the capital markets world, the idea is that there's a bunch of models that have been created by quants, within the capital markets world. How can you utilize models most effectively? You can actually use AI agents to do that for you. So if you describe these models to AI agents as tools, right? AI agents can really optimize how to use the different models to get the outcome you want, right? So that's a whole other big use case today. So there's really interest in this space. Like pretty much every firm we've spoken to has a track dedicated to this, to figure out how to either optimize workflows to save on productivity, increase productivity, and also find alpha generative opportunities.
Yeah. And I think, look, the issue you have around some of that, where for example, immediately when people think about the Terminator, they think fear, and that's one of the first emotions that people come back into it. When people think about AI in the job world, they immediately think about my job security. You mentioned there about them sort of doing, finding alpha in the same way that teams of quants will do. There's teams of quants there who are then suddenly who spent ages on their education and trying to get to be their prime advantage about the shops they can create and all this sort of stuff. There's fear around that sort of stuff coming in, which again it's often an inhibitor to adoption. Where do you think that all works in harmony, and how do you remove that fear and see people taking it as an opportunity? Because I think this isn't man against machine or human against machine. This is much more about human and machine, machine supporting human to be better at what they're doing.
That's exactly right. Firstly, there's still a lot to do, just to be very clear. I don't see AI necessarily replacing huge amounts of jobs just yet. However, to your point, I think people, doing certain jobs can definitely do a lot more, right, using AI assistance. And specifically, I would say in the software development world, right, that is actually right now today a thing. Like it's real, right? So these models have been trained to code, right? So I still code. I actually still code, right? I still love it. I still enjoy it. It's one of my pastimes, right? It's therapeutic for me. I still love it. And what you find is, normally, you're writing some code, you hit a blocker in your code, right? And you're like, okay, you're going to spend another hour trying to fix that blocker. You could literally ask one of these models, give it the code, right, and say, fix this for me, or suggest fixes, and within seconds it will give you the fix.
Yeah, and it's amazing, isn't it?
So all of a sudden, maybe if you're an advanced engineer, you could do much more. If you're maybe a mid-level engineer, you could do much more. And if you're a low-level engineer, you can learn even faster to get to that next level of seniority, right? So, that's an example where I don't ever believe that these things will actually replace an engineer, because engineers, they think laterally. There's also like many different interconnected components that you got to think about. These things are really good at doing atomic type, coding. So that's just one area. But these co-pilots are likely to emerge in other areas as well. Research, right? Specifically research in healthcare, in all these different domains. You're going to start seeing these type of co-pilots appear to assist people. So I totally agree. It's like a symbiotic relationship between man and machine, ultimately. The types of jobs that people talk about that AI may replace, it's customer support, right? So if you have like a whole team of people answering support questions, well, now you can train these models to literally provide human-like answers about your domain, essentially. That is an area that is definitely, is probably going to be disrupted.
But it just moves, doesn't it? This is the thing that I don't think people understand. It doesn't mean there's a whole wave of people who can't do anything. It just moves them into a different sort of space. Absolutely. And people are investing in thought process about, we've both got kids of roughly similar ages, right? It's about thinking about what skill sets they've had, and if they've got a technical skill set, there's definitely things that they're going to be able to do. But there's also jobs that will be disrupted with technology, as you're talking about. But also it's like those human skills. How are you teaching your children human skills to be able to adapt to the new marketplace? That might be leadership, that might be sales, that might be presentation, that might be presentation. Lots of different things that people can move into. And I think the next step is people thinking about that sort of stuff and working out how they can adapt to a new, and every be it industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and now 5.0. Everyone adapts and moves in different ways, right? And that's the thing I think people have got to get over to, because it's just such an easy and lazy way of looking at this sort of thing sometimes, I think. And we know there's risks, there's challenges. Maybe actually you want to spread some light on that, so that's that side of things as well. But within it, with every risk, with every challenge, to me there's just a plethora of and an absolute avalanche more of opportunity within it. It's really exciting, and to be at the forefront of it like you are, in a space which I think can really benefit from it, in a space that has innovated far less than other areas. I think this is really exciting. But let's touch on that briefly, because I knew we do this with you. It's something where I could listen to you speak for hours and hours, and we've already shot over. But I just want you to touch on those risks and the challenges in the space, and give us a quick overview of that side of things as well.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's quite a few. So number one is, what kind of data sets have been used to train these models? That's like a big question these days. Is that copyrighted material, for example? Did you get permission to actually use that material? And so if you end up using a model, right, that has violated, some of those laws essentially, then what does that mean for your business, right? So that's a big thing. So there's a lot of work now around being very transparent about what data is being used to train these models, essentially. Bias, right?
Yeah.
Bias is a big thing. It still is, right? So bias, racial bias, gender bias, these are still basically the data that the models have been trained with. If it contains bias, the model will be biased, right?
Yeah.
So, again, that's quite a big area. And I definitely think that there's big risks. You kind of touched on it. One of these risks that I see, that I care about, is the impact on children and young people, right? So I believe in, you've got to have the ability to learn how to learn, right? Like, it's so important to learn how to learn. It's so important to go through, read the book. It's so important to read the paragraphs, right, and actually understand what they mean, and then do the exam or do the test or do whatever. It's not all about exams, but spend that time reading, understanding, learning, and then applying what you've learned, right? And these things, they can actually do a lot of that for you. And so risk there is that we end up creating a society that has really forgotten how to learn because it's been assisted. So, again, I definitely encourage my kids, and I encourage your kids, to continue the process of learning manually, right? As well as using.
Sorry to cut in. I think this is a fascinating. I mean, this is a whole show on its own, which is another story. So we might have to come you back onto this. But I think, I've often thought about this, and watching my kids learn as you do with yours at the moment, right? There is no shortage of access to information, which I think actually can accelerate them. So when you talk about kids being on TikTok or doing this, that, and the other, or Googling things, that sort of there would be question marks that I would have had as a kid that you would only have been able to find by going through an encyclopedia and finding an encyclopedia, or going to the library to find that information out. Now, my kids find out, try and find something out. It's 2 seconds on their phone, and they've got the answer to it. So does that mean that they are less, or learning less, or does it actually mean they're learning more? Do they have this access to a huge amount of information that can do that? And I think that, used the right way, this can be something in the same sort of way that accelerates learning in a completely different way that we didn't have the advantage to. So we should be creating this generation of smarter and smarter people. And I think there's just an easy, as happens with every generation hits the last one about how lazy or whatever they might be. There's tons of history around how that works and why, and psychology around why. But I think you're right, that whilst there is that sort of stuff, to me the challenges of looking at that and saying, right, how can we utilize it to make learning better, where education on its own has stayed in the same sort of way, with the same sort of lessons and the same sort of stuff that doesn't necessarily steel people for the real world there afterwards for generations. This could be something completely game changing on it. But as I said, that's a whole nother show. Let's finish on Apex. You've had this partnership with Deus Ex Capital, as we've spoken about beforehand. What's it mean? What can we expect to see? What's the rest of we're hurtling towards the end of 2024. This will be out in September now. So we might as well talk about 2025. Tell us what 24-25 looks like for you and the business. What can we expect to see? What's exciting?
Thank you. Really appreciate it. We are finding out so many different, very interesting real world use cases that we want to implement and solve. And so what you're going to start seeing is, we like posting on LinkedIn, the work that we do. So you're definitely going to start seeing more apps that are dedicated to solving these use cases, literally at the desk level. And our plan is to expand, right, literally globally, to offer these solutions to other firms in the capital market space. And we're going to stay in the capital market space to begin with, even though the stuff we've built actually has applications outside the capital market space.
About.
Yeah, but we think it's good to focus, right? And
I agree.
If it works for one firm, it should work for the other as well. So if we can get more clients using it, that's great for the firm. But at the same time, we're very interested in understanding as these new models come about, understanding their strengths, their weaknesses, and bringing more of them in so that we can offer our customers choice, right?
Yeah.
And a safe place to actually experiment with them, use them, specifically around capital markets use cases. So I would say our focus really is more, along those lines. And some of the clients that we now have, we're helping them build like dashboards very quickly using our tech. So we want to do more of that, where as we do that, we actually learn more about their domain. So these are like offshoots of the capital markets industry, where we're able to like help them build systems quickly, just reusing some of the stuff we have. Where we want to do more of that as well with customers. So, the other thing about these models is they're multilingual. So, we've actually got this app where, it actually connects to over 3 million research papers, millions. Like, in fact, every day new research papers are found. And we have the ability to, question a research paper and these advanced academic research papers and translate the answer into different languages, right? So
Amazing, isn't it?
somebody, in one part of the world, wants access to advanced knowledge, but they don't have that yet, right? Because of the language barrier. This could be a way to transfer that knowledge to them. So these kind of things really excite us, and it's all part of the help educate, empower, elevate mantra, as well as benefit our clients in the capital markets. So that's the trajectory.
Well, it sounds like, as I expected, everything going in the right direction. I love what you guys are doing. I love this area, and I'm so pleased people like you who've got the minds on it to say what where it can go and what it can do. So, Usman, I only apologise for not being able to have a longer than we've had on this show already. It's always a pleasure. It's lovely to see you again, and best of luck with everything and this new partnership and everything moving further forward. Apex C3. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Toby. Really appreciate it. And as always, look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. And thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.